What is up, fellow sickos? I am Dan Pavalli, joined by my certified fantabulous co-host, Mr. Grant Hughes. We put out the Time Capsule podcast where you could listen to 2 hours of Grant and I grading the 2023 offseason for every Western Conference team. You know what it's time to do now, Grant? Actually take ownership of those grades and regrade the 2023 offseason for every Western Conference team. For anyone worried, rest assured, we're going to get to this offseason's grades. For us, we found it makes sense to actually wait until later, because then when we go back and regrade things, there's less for us to, like additional stuff for us to consider. And also no one's doing off-season grades at the end of August, early September. Like they've already moved on from that. And so we stand out a little bit. We've had time to, you pointed this out, Grant. One, how are you? But two, you're also a genius because you said it keeps us removed from that initial knee-jerk reaction where you're going to be more impassioned and haven't had as much time to critically think about the grade. So this offseason's grades are coming, but for now, we're going to regrade the Western Conference offseason, and the Eastern Conference regrade will come next week. And with that, Mr. Hughes, how the heck are you?
I'm prepared to be accountable. Isn't that what the expectation is today? Are you prepared to be accountable? I actually I didn't really look. I know we have our grades up. I'm looking at them right now. And this is going to be an exercise where I feel like I'll spend most of the time trying to reverse engineer why I thought what I thought, because I'm believe it or not, I don't remember the logic behind what I thought a year ago at this time.
Do you know what's sick? Our dedication here, and also this HardwoodKnocks merch, Sicko Mode collection. You should go purchase it. The link is in the podcast and YouTube description. I went back and listened to all 2 hours plus of us.
At what speed?
2 times speed. That's as fast as, well, you could go faster, but I did 2 times speed because I talk so fast that anything faster than that is just like drivel. And so I some of my logic on the things now is fresh in my mind, which I think will make it better. And it's like, oh, kind of what was I thinking there? But I'm interested to see where we kind of shift from. And for anyone, the way we're going to do this is we'll hit the greatest hits. We'll talk about the transactions that kind of define the offseason. If you want to see basically a full complete transaction lot, I will have it up on screen on YouTube. So if you really want to use but we're not going to sit there and list off every move like we typically do for the grades, because we'll be here for 2+ hours then.
Or 1+ if you want to listen to this we'll be here for 2 hours, but you could knock it out as a listener in 1 if you go 2x, which is 2x is too fast for me. I can't do it. 1.5, maybe 1.75 if it's purely informational.
Oh, I've done 2.5 before. Because it's easier to change it on your computer to go up. I've done 2.5 before.
That's
I got too much stuff to consume and too much stuff to do. I can't be sitting there listening to podcasts at one speed.
like a normal human. Yeah. Okay. Well, good for you. I always am concerned that after I listen to a podcast at accelerated speed, that I go around speaking to people way too fast. They think I'm all hopped up. I don't know if that's actually how I come across, but that's my concern.
I think you're just so excited about whatever subject you're talking about at the time. It's infectious. You hear the person talking fast. It's excitement. That's what it is with me. I get to talk with Grant. I'm just over the moon, excited. And so it becomes infectious, and now you're going to talk fast for the rest of the day,
maybe, or I'll be burned out from talking. We'll see. Let's start, shall we? Denver Nuggets. We're starting with them. Traded a 29 first to the Thunder with top 5 protection for a couple of years, and the number 40 pick, Maxwell Lewis, to the Lakers. They get back Julian Strawther, Jalen Pickett, Hunter Tyson, who make up kind of this young core of guys that now are going to be pressed into more duty this year. That's not the topic of this podcast. Reggie Jackson came back 2 years, $10.3 million. Can't wait to hear you speak about that one, because I do remember that from last year. Signed Strawther, 4 years, $12.5 million, 2 fully guaranteed. Signed Pickett, signed Tyson, brought in Justin Holiday, re-signed DeAndre Jordan. That's kind of the extent of there's some two-way.
We didn't miss anything too. Is there's nothing. It'll be denoted on the screen if you're watching on YouTube in white, I think is the font color I chose. But there's nothing here that they did groundbreakingly that should change our grade. And so first time around, Grant, I guess we're both looking at it, so you're obviously going to know. I gave them a D+. You gave them a C-.
Yeah.
Would you like to, when we do actual grades, we'll have to save it to the end, but because this is a regrade, I guess it makes more sense to do it at the beginning. Do you feel better, or even before, do you feel better or worse about the offseason they had in 2023 now?
I don't know if I feel all that different, because I think, the draft machinations, I understand the theory of it now. None of those guys really popped, never really had the opportunity to. Maybe that happens this year. I think the big difference between us was like and not saying you were wrong. The Reggie Jackson deal 2 for 10.3 with a player option. It's like, why is Reggie Jackson getting a player option? He was not a difference maker. He wasn't like a catastrophe.
Okay, but because you had that player option, you ended up having to give up 3 second-round picks get rid of him this summer.
Do we factor that? I guess we factor that in because they put themselves in that position.
Yeah, right? I mean, it's how this impacted it. I mean, it's going to get really dicey when we get to the Clippers because the James Harden trade did not happen in the offseason, but you have to wait. Well, what was the point of waiting when you gave up what you did and conceded? So with the Nuggets, look, I'm just going to come out flat out and say it. I think you can feel better about specifically Julian Strawther before he got injured, be like, okay, like I could see the theory of him. Why do you feel like aside from that, unless you're really on the Hunter Tyson or Jalen Pickett bandwagon still, why would you feel better? Justin Holiday worked out well for them. This is just like, I'm going to stick with a D+. They didn't do anything to shift my view. And I could be talked into going lower because my fear anyway, kind of came to pass with the Reggie Jackson stuff. It's not at a high level enough. I already dinged them with a D+. If you think Julian Strawther is eventually going to be the third best player on the Nuggets, then by all means, jack up your grade. But from where I'm standing, that's the only reason to change the grade of this team.
Yeah, I think if I were moving one way or the other, I'm going to stay at a C-. It just like feels slightly below average. I do think we should mention that, like, as we discussed a million times last year at this time, you couldn't have kept Bruce Brown, so that's got very little to do, I think, for me and for both of us of why this is a below average grade. Jeff Green also got away 2 years, $19.2 million, ended up in Houston. Like, okay, I don't know if you're not going to, again, like if you were going to go higher, it would just be on the basis of the thinking behind giving up a future first, a fairly distant future first, to get 3 guys like late first, early seconds that like, it's just like a shotgun approach. Like maybe one of these guys is going to pop, but if you're going to go up in the grade, you're just basing that on like speculation that that's going to happen because it didn't happen last year. Not that that's fair because this was a title contender that brought in a bunch of rookies and it's like these guys,
we both picked them to win the title last year, by the way.
Yeah. And like, well, so that's where it goes the other way. It's like, why did you want a bunch of young guys that just like no way they're going to be able to help you?
They're trying to do that's more of that might be more of a conversation for their actual 24 offseason grades now that Kentavious Caldwell-Pope is gone. I understand what they're trying to do. It just so rarely works. I can appreciate the swing, but it might be a level of TBD because you want to see what Pickett and Tyson and Strawther still turn into. And I think Strawther specifically, he's going to have I would assume like a pretty regular role next year. But like as of right now, this has done nothing. Justin Holiday was a little bit better than I expected. Julian Strawther I'm more intrigued by him than I was expected, but like I'm probably less intrigued with Jalen Pickett at this point. So it's a wash for me.
Yeah,
Let's do the Minnesota Timberwolves. So the thing we missed, so you can see that they signed Anthony Edwards at the time he got his extension. It was a max deal. They re-signed Naz Reid, 3 years, $42 million. There's some second round pick trades in there. They signed Nickeil Alexander-Walker to a 2-year, $9 million contract. They signed Shake Milton to a 2-year, $10 million contract. That was non-guaranteed. He's no longer on the team. Signed Troy Brown Jr., 2 years, $8 million deal, non-guaranteed in year 2. And the thing that the grade came in. So the grade you're going to hear that we gave was before the Jaden McDaniels extension, which we actually talked about specific numbers for it. Do you remember? You won't remember. You and I were wondering if like 4 years and 140 was a good number for him. They got him for 5 years and $131 million. It could go up to $136 million. I still feel fine. Like, it wasn't caked in the grade, but even after the regular season he had on offense, he came alive during the playoffs. But it's fair to be concerned. The regular season is longer. This is a deal that I just feel perfectly. Like, if I'm the Timberwolves, I'm like, okay, like we knocked this one out of the park.
Yeah, I think, well, you were slightly higher. You had an A- and I had a B+. I imagine that if the McDaniels deal had been a part of this, and based on what you claim we said, which I don't remember as far as the years and dollars, we probably would have gone higher, right? Just because, that's such a bargain for McDaniels on top of everything else. I could imagine. I mean, you'd have had to get to a flat A, which is kind of a big leap.
And look, I'm rising it here. They get an A+. What did they do wrong? I mean, the Naz Reid deal looks way better than it did at the time, and we loved it. The Anthony Edwards deal, it was always going to look fine. And okay, now he's going to get the 30% max. So he's actually not getting, it becomes like 5 and whatever it is now, like 240 something.
You're ecstatic if you're the Wolves that you are paying more now, though.
So like there's no, it's okay. Shake Milton didn't really become a part of the team. Ditto for Troy Brown, whatever. Like you hit on Nikhil Alexander Walker there. So I'm going to go to an A plus. And just they made it to the conference finals coming off a year in which people were kind of not this podcast, shout out to us, but off a year in which people were counting that. What did they miss on? Like, what is you're going to miss on the Shake Miltons and the Troy Browns, but the core of your offseason, they hit on everything. Like even I still like the Leonard Miller deal. It's like you gave up 2 seconds to go get Leonard Miller at number 33. Okay, you don't necessarily see the long-term fit on this team, but he's done some filthy things in the G League. So I go A plus. I don't know what you want to bring yours.
I'll just keep a similar level of jump. I'll go to A minus. The A plus to me, it's like it was perfect. And you did mention like a couple of these things didn't work out, but they got all the big business right. So yeah, it's got to go up. I mean, just looking at the list, everything that really mattered was a hit. And so I don't know. You can't move down. And I think they definitely look better.
This is the no notes. Like we're going to spend less time on them because it's what was there what did you want them to do that they missed out on? It's okay. The problem they had was could they have gotten some more just shot creation, secondary ball handling beyond Mike Conley and Anthony Edwards? They didn't have a ton of resources to do that. Yeah. And I thought Shake Milton at the time, I thought it was a reasonable gamble. There's no one they missed out on though, where it was like, oh, he would have been way better for them and they would have won the title if they had him.
And even those, I don't know if you said it, but they're both Milton and Brown had non-guarantees on the second year. And didn't they trade Brown? I forget now, or maybe both.
They ended up. I think they traded both. Didn't they end up trading both of them? Shake Milton was part of the Monte Morris deal, if I'm not mistaken.
That sounds right. Yeah. So either way, they were going to be off the hook for those, and that's not like they're catastrophic. They paid $5 million for one guy and $4 million for the other, and then they're just clean. So
we can move on to the Oklahoma City Thunder.
Yeah.
They were part of that they were on the other side of the Julian Strother trade. This is interesting to look back on now, Grant. They traded Derek Lively, which was number 12, for pick number 10, Cason Wallace, and took back Davis Bertans. He was guaranteed $22.5 million through 2024, 2025. He ends up getting traded to Charlotte. They capitalized by waiving him with the $5 million partial guarantee. They ended up with Victor Oladipo on the team. The thing that we missed that just didn't have room to include on the graphic, it's too negligible though, is they did trade. I think it was it on opening night or just before it? They traded for Kevin Porter Jr. and then waived him so they could get 2 seconds from the Rockets.
That's right.
That far removed from the situation because of the Kevin Porter Jr. domestic violence issues, which we went into at length. So you can go back and listen to us talk about the actual issue there. I still think that they shouldn't have done it because they were able to capitalize on his domestic violence allegations, but I don't think it's going to materially change my grade for them here. When I look at, they also signed Vasilij Micic, 3 years, $23.6 million. They ended up moving him as well. It was a team option on year 3 though. So what's interesting about this team, I think for what I'm zeroing in on, is that trade for Cason Wallace. I destroyed the Thunder last year, Grant. And we've gotten complaints in the comments that I'm too much of a Thunder. The skateboard guy is too much of a Thunder fanboy. I've now seen twice. Our names, I guess that's on my fault. I should put our handles back on. We have names. You don't have to just call us if you're watching this show, we have names. I'm Grant. He's Dan. So identify us as
we both love skateboards. What else? Yeah.
Look, there it is. There are names. So I gave them a C minus. They shouldn't. Here's my thing. Derek Lively is better than I ever could have anticipated, but so is Cason Wallace.
Right.
And so I still think OKC didn't get enough run out of its cap space, but because you ended up I like the idea of having the distant Denver first in your back pocket now. And then because I really love Cason, I picked Cason Wallace for first team all rookie. So I'm coming in from that perspective. I feel like I kind of have to bump them up and say, because I guess Micic didn't work out and they used him to go get Gordon Hayward, who also doesn't work out. I think I have to go to probably a B minus. Is it the gamble for Cason Wallace was absolutely reasonable at this point. I could probably even be talked into a B. Is that too high? What should I be doing here?
Well, I'm curious too. I just what if they just took Lively? Are they in a better?
No. Okay. Here's my thing about that is Derek Lively, is he going to have been the difference? Would they view Chet Holmgren as a center?
Yeah.
And so if you're getting Derek Lively, I know he's cheaper, but you kind of want to view him as a core piece. Would he have gotten as many developmental reps in Oklahoma City as he did in Dallas?
It's so hard to know because I was going to ask, as I was thinking, Well, but who, like, if you're just in a vacuum trading Derek Lively or Cason Wallace today, who's getting you more in return? I feel like it's probably Lively,
It
but
is.
your point is correct that had he been on the Thunder, I don't know what we would think about him. Maybe it'd be the same. But maybe he also would have just not gotten to play enough. That's also a possibility. I don't know. I think maybe you remember, was a lot of the below average grade, because we had the same grade here, a C minus, tied to so your cap space went to taking on Davis Bertans, basically.
Well,
I can imagine
we
shitting on
received
that.
pushback from Thunder fans, and by the way, we turned out right on this. So hashtag victory lap. So maybe I'll go to a C because I'm in love with Cason Wallace. Was the argument well, they're going to be able to use Davis Bertans to make this deal at the deadline that makes them materially better. Guess what? They made a deal. It did not pan out. I thought it was a reasonable dice roll, but it didn't pan out. And so the whole theory of why it was okay to take on Davis Bertans is he's this expendable salary filler. It did not play out the best case scenario way. So, and even just, they probably expected Micic to play more of a role, or maybe they didn't, but the contract they signed him to, certainly to me, thinks that they did. This is coming across as us destroying them. I mean, I guess it's time that we say something not like, 11 of 10, no notes on the Thunder. I'm so big a believer in Cason Wallace, and I don't like, what's the opportunity? Look at where they're at now with Isaiah Hartenstein and Alex Caruso. They didn't to be set up to do that. You know what? This is purely because of Cason Wallace and the Denver trade. I'm going to go to a B minus. And the only reason I won't go higher is because Derek Lively is really fucking good.
That's where I'm stuck too. I get, like, we're talking about hypotheticals. I guess, like, looking at where the Thunder have strengths, it's in the guard and wing section, and Wallace it may struggle for a long time to have a larger role than he currently has, just because the Thunder are so loaded. I think he's going to be, like, Wallace's floor is a phenomenal role player. Like, he's going to be that. He is basically that right now. I wonder though. I'm hung up on Lively,
exactly,
so I'm going to move him.
Beverly thought he was at one point.
I'm going to move them to a C, which is still moving up, but I'm hung up on, well, what if they just had taken Lively?
This is bad podcasting. We need to remember to note this at the beginning next time. C is a good grade. You have passed. It's the D's and the F's that you really, if you want to get mad or be sad about, that C is average. And so if you think the Thunder had an above average offseason last year, B minus is above average. C is average. So we should have noted that.
And the argument that, well, look where the Thunder are today, so therefore this has to be an A. That's not
nothing to do with the offseason.
Nothing to do with the offseason. That's like, we agree. If you listen to this at all, like, we again, like you said, 11 of 10, no notes on the Thunder. This was just a fine to me offseason.
I would just like to say, on behalf of the comment section, finally the Lionel Messi character says something negative about the Thunder. Thank you.
Thank you, skateboard guy.
Portland, we can move on to the Portland Trailblazers.
We sure can. I'll go through this one here. They drafted Scoot Henderson at number 3. I seem to recall we both liked that.
We are going to have, by the way, this is spoiler. We're going to have some things to walk back on the Eastern Conference podcast with the Hornets. Just good. FYI.
I love to walk back. Chris Murray at number 23. Drafted Ryan Rupert at 43. He got a 3-year deal. Signed Jeremy Grant. That's a big one. 5 years, 160. He has a player option on the last year of that. Matched the 3 for 31 on Matisse Thybulle. That was fun. Remember that? Was it Dallas? Dallas signed him, right?
Yeah.
To the offer sheet. Couple two-way transactions here. Did they do anything else, Dan? It hadn't happened yet.
Remember the whole reason we waited last year until I think it was like August 20 something or 18th or whatever it was like, well, we need to see how this Damian Lillard stuff plays out. And guess what, Grant?
It played out
too soon.
Yeah, went too soon.
I had $1 for every time I went too soon, guys.
So, this does not factor into the grade. I don't know what it's going to do for the regrade. Traded Dame Lillard, Yusuf Nurkic, Keon Johnson, and Nas Little for Drew Holiday, DeAndre Ayton, Tumani Kamara. I guess he'd already been picked by Phoenix. 28 first round swap from Milwaukee, a 29 first from Milwaukee, a 2030 first round swap from Milwaukee. Then flipped Holiday to Boston for Brogdon, Robert Williams III. Another first, which became Bub Carrington,
became Denny
Avdia, and a 29 first. So, I mean, how do you want to tackle this? Because what 90% of what, well, I guess there's a lot to talk about here because Scoot is a big deal. The Grant contract's a big deal. And then obviously the couple trades are huge.
So why didn't we go with a TBD for this team? Or were we just not convinced that Damian Lillard was going to be traded? Because I gave them first time around a C-. You were more generous. I gave it. That's a pretty big difference for us. We tend to have like dual group think here. I think I look back on this offseason more fondly than I did before. I don't know about you. And I think the haul they got for Damian Lillard when he was so obviously trying to get to one team is impressive. I mean, like you turned him into effectively it's just because now so you turn him into Denny Avdia and then you turn him into the Milwaukee first and the 2 swaps and plus Robert Williams the third. That's the crux. And you, by the way, I view this as a net positive. DeAndre Ayton's involved in there. Is his deal worse than Nurkic's right now? I was about to say you got off Nurkic, but you also ended up with DeAndre Ayton. And the other guy that they got who is he's a hashtag guy or a caps lock guy. Tumani Kamara can guard no fewer than 4.5 positions. And so I look back on them deciding to actually move on from Damian Lillard, even if they kind of dragged it out so that he had to initiate it. I view that as a positive. The things that I have questions about, I'm fine. The cap is going up and he played really well last year and did not ruin their ability to get a top draft pick. The Jeremy Grant deal, I'm just kind of whatever. I think that if fans believe they need to get 3 first-round picks for him, they're out of their minds. They're not going to get that. But I think his deal is going to just be movable. I don't think he's going to be there long-term. I don't know if he'll get traded this season. I think he could get traded, and it wouldn't shock me if and when he does, if they got multiple first-round picks. I feel a little bit more uneasy. I love the Chris Murray pick. I loved the Scoot Henderson pick. I don't know if I loved the Scoot Henderson pick as much as you loved the Scoot Henderson pick, but
obviously not.
Say this before I throw it to you. I'm not dinging them for not selecting Brandon Miller because I really do believe that Scoot Henderson is still going to be really good. And so while Brandon Miller is better and just much better overall than we thought, I personally cannot, especially for what they needed if you were going to get rid of Damian Lillard, Scoot was, and also Brandon Miller was off the board. So what am I talking about? They drafted at number 3. So I'm an idiot. If you wanted them to go with a Thompson twin, Amen Thompson's great. I love Asar Thompson, but I don't view the Scoot selection. I might be more neutral on it now. You're obligated to take him rather than oh my God, he fell to them.
Right.
I don't view it in a negative light.
Well, so you were lower on that. So maybe the question is this: take out the Damian Lillard trade and just regrade what we talked about when we did this last year. Are you higher or lower on what Portland did exclusive of the Damian Lillard trade?
That's an unfair question.
Well, I'm just curious. It's not, I'm just because I would have to be lower.
After the rookie season that Scoot Henderson had, you would have to be lower. But the context of this, he was dealing with injuries, his role of coming off the bench. So you have to you can't feel better about Scoot Henderson today than you did when he was drafted. There was the car drove off the lot factor to it. Mm-hmm. What I ding them for on the re-listen is because I thought they were chicken shits when it came to Damian Lillard. Is that you should have just made the decision. I thought it took gall to take Scoot Henderson, which I applauded them for, but you still made Damian Lillard kind of initiate the breakup. And I thought that was real, I don't want to use the word cowardly, but it was lame. You should have you probably would have created an even better frothier market for him. And you've been the one that made the decision.
So I came in with a B. Are you going to go over the top of the B, including the Damian Lillard trade now in your regrade?
Yeah, because just look at, by the way, if you wanted to feel better independent of the Damian Lillard trade, I really do think it's the Jeremy Grant deal. I just don't, it was viewed as so much more toxic because we were all collectively, you and I did frame as a percentage of the salary cap, but you're still just, 5 years and 160 million. Yeah. 5 years and 160 million through his age 34 season. Right now it's just all right. He could be your 7th guy and that's fine. So I'm exaggerating, obviously. So I think we might still differ on this. I'm going to go to an A-.
I was thinking B+ or A-, just because I do think when it all finally shook out, moving on from Lillard and somehow finding leverage when he was, like you said, just trying to get to the Heat. And the Blazers deserve credit for saying no, we're just going to make this a rough situation until we get something we actually want. And we don't we're not beholden to where you want to go. And nobody, by the way, now is mad at the Blazers for quote unquote treating Dame that way. Like that. Remember that was a narrative.
Barry Jackson, who I'm sure is very well connected within the Heat organization, still seems very angry about it. So I don't know if he has equity in the Heat or just like, did he bet on did he place a bet on where Damian Lillard was going to end up? But he seems to be trolling whenever opportunity. I see someone send me a tweet of like Barry Jackson trolling the Blazers front office.
Yeah. I feel like I need to come up to an A- too. Even with like, obviously I'm not as high on Scoot Henderson now as I was, just because I thought I drank the Kool-Aid on Scoot for sure. He could still be great. But it's just like you said, you can't feel as good now as you did a year ago. And just to be consistent, like we always are pushing teams to just like pull the ripcord when it's clear that they need to. And Portland did that. And that wasn't a factor in our grade last year. So I got to just meet you at the A-.
But I want to ask you a question though, because this doesn't factor into our regrade. Would you rather have Denny Avdia or Malcolm Brogdon on an expiring, the number 14 pick, which became Bub Carrington, and then that 2029 first? What would you rather have in a vacuum?
Are there other protections on the first?
In 2029, I do not believe so. I can double check that though.
I really like Avdia. It's weird. I was annoyed that the Wizards traded him. I thought, why would you get rid of that guy? His contract is so reasonable. We both are in the bag for him. I think I still might rather have that pick and the salaries of Brogdon's salary that you could move. I think I might rather have the other side of it.
So just for the details on the pick for anyone listening, I know Grant knows this. It is the second most favorable of Boston, Milwaukee, or Portland. And so I think because it's not the most favorable, I'll go with Denny Avdia. And also I'm probably going to say some pretty inflammatory things about Bub Carrington before he ever takes the floor. But like the path, like his role in Washington, I'm going to like way more than if he had been in Portland, where you're just not going to have the runway to explore what they can with him on the ball. Yeah. So I think knowing what was available at number 14 and the fact that you still get the most favorable of those picks, I think Denny Avdia is just amazing. And honestly, I don't know. I thought the Wizards, I didn't love it for them at first, but I'm kind of just like, we want them to be bad and like get the butt. Like Denny Avdia wasn't going to be the best player on a title contender. And like Portland's kind of building this like interesting defensive identity between him and Klingon and Jeremy Grant, and you have Thibault and Toumani Camara there. Like they could do it, but Delano Banton's still there. This veers too far into, but I was just curious where you landed as to what you'd rather have those assets or Denny.
It's bad podcasting, but I don't have a strong feeling either way. Like I love Avdia, but if you're rebuilding, I like those assets too. So I mean, it seems like a fairly reasonable deal.
Let's get on to the Utah Jazz.
Yeah.
So they drafted Taylor Hendricks at number 9. Speaking of me saying some pretty spicy things, I was elated about that. Keontae George at number 16 and Bryce Sensabaugh at number 28. They had the Jordan Clarkson renegotiate and extend for worth 3 years and $55 million. So he made 23.5 last year, and he will now make 14.1 this coming season, followed by 14.3 in the final year. They traded Rudy Gay in Memphis 2026 second for John Collins. He has 2 years left on his deal as we record this, and nothing else. We didn't miss anything huge. So nothing else super noteworthy. If you want the transaction log, check it out on YouTube if you're not there already. I'm pretty Utah. I gave an A and you gave an A-.
Why?
Think about those.
Why were we so high on this? Was it just the draft?
No, do you know why we were so high on it? It was because, they're clearly taking the long view, and like this time they're going to make sure they're bad enough.
That's right.
To be a top lottery team. And John Collins cost nothing too. It's just like, so I still don't even view that as a bad deal. It's just something that maybe hasn't panned out ideally, but is he the source of like why they hate Walker Kessler now?
That's going to, well, you know what I heard somebody, now I can't remember who it was. There were like intimations that Walker Kessler's a little soft. This is just me repeating what someone like
his physique, or
no, like he's not like, I don't know. It's coach speak, but like doesn't quite have the like killer instinct or like, I'm going to smash this guy, like get over, that kind of thing. It was all I can remember is that it was someone whose opinion on the Jazz I thought was like, oh, that's a credible opinion. It might, I don't think it was Tony Jones, but it was someone where you'd say like, okay, that person knows what they're talking about. It wasn't like this is a terrible way to like relay secondhand information, but
you're not attributing it to anyone where it's like,
I pulled it out of the air. It's not my opinion because I don't have that opinion of Walker Kessler, but it was somebody who was in a position to know. But I say that because it's like, it's at the time Walker, we're like, oh my God, this guy's outplaying Rudy Gobert as a rookie and all these metrics. Like, what a great, he's going to be a cornerstone. And then last year it was like, so he's not starting. That's the thing. Anyway, it offered like some explanation to what seemed like an unsolvable mystery. So that's the only reason I'm saying that. Grade wise though, so this feels to me like we just kind of liked the organizational direction as much as anything. And I know you loved Hendricks, and George, I think, was like a pretty, well-regarded pick at 16 who had a lot of moments last year. I feel like we're still in the range of last year's grade. I don't know if I want to move it down just a touch. But yeah, there's no obvious, like, oh my God, we need to go way lower on this team. I don't think.
Oh, well, I mean, it's relative to their resources. Do you think everything they did with what was available to them? I mean, when you look at the draft specifically, I'm still incredibly high on Taylor Hendricks. And so I have questions about him on offense more so than I did last year, but I think that he's a better, like he can be a wing defender. So that I feel even better about his defense for the most part. But so you take him at number 9. Who were you upset that they passed on? Is it Casey Wallace? Would you prefer to them have Derek Lively? Would they even have taken him?
No, yeah, they wouldn't.
There's Pods, there's Jaime Jaquez, Cam Whitmore was on the board for everybody. So I think it needs to be moved down because I wonder if having John Collins kind of complicated their front court rotation. Like if John Collins wasn't there in retrospect, we could have more information on Taylor Hendricks specifically. I think the Keontae George pick is going to end up panning out really well. I'm kind of with you though, in the sense that I guess it can't be moved down a lot, but I do think it needs to be moved down just because if they could have been spicier, like I'll give it a B plus. Is that going too stark? Just because we supported the John Collins trade at the time, but it's just kind of like, oh, they didn't rehabilitate his value.
Right. That was the play clearly, right? It's like, well, we'll just get him. Like, why wouldn't we get John Collins for what it cost to get him? Which was just, like you said, nothing. A second rounder, Rudy Gay, who cares? It just didn't work out. Like he didn't rehabilitate his value. I don't know that he's worth more than that now. Probably not. Probably something similar.
But what they also did is like maybe why we can't move. They didn't lose the flexibility this summer. They were able to renegotiate and extend Lauri Markkanen, which I think you could argue there wasn't a better use of their cap space in a vacuum. It's, well, do you like the idea of having him long-term when you should be bad? So I will go to a B plus. I could probably be talked into a B, but like our grade was never based on the theory of like, it might have been too based on, oh, they'll be bad enough where like they have all this stuff and it's going to come with a top 5 draft pick.
Yeah.
And, oh no, they're drafting outside the top 8 again.
Yeah. I think it's too early I'm still encouraged by Hendricks and like the multi-position defense shot it well on low volume from 3 last year. I know there was some streakiness in there. George, we'll see. Like I got a real trial by fire last year. Is going to get another one. So I'm going to go. You went to a B plus. I hate to just copy you, but I'm not moving down quite as much. I'll go B plus. Just the A range feels too high because there's not any like. I feel like you would have needed some like absolute home runs, and I don't.
And a B feels too low. Like, do we demerit them a full letter grade here?
Well, I'm not. I'm just moving down a little.
No, because I thought about a B because I'm just like the offseason, like looking back, it wasn't as spectacular as we framed it, but it's also when it's relative to what's available to you. What did you, unless your argument is, well, they had Lowry, they renegotiated, extended Jordan Clarkson, they trade for Collins. Why not get more win now talent in there? But I think the fact that they were able to open up so much playing time for Keontae George,
right,
like after the start of the season, worked out for them. If they're the thing that I lament the most on their behalf is I would have liked to have seen more of Taylor Hendricks last year.
Sure.
And I thought they were going to figure out a way to do that while having John Collins on the roster.
Yeah, but that doesn't really affect the fact, like we're just talking about they drafted the guy, not what they did with him after the fact, I guess. Although that does factor into like their grade would look better if Taylor Hendricks had made an all rookie team or something. So
correct. And by the way, that maybe I'm being salty because I predicted him to make first team all rookie ahead of the season.
I still believe. I think he's got.
I believe. I'm just saying it's immediate. These are regrades based off what's happened so far. Next team, Golden State Warriors, Mr. Hughes.
Yeah. All right. Well, I'm glad that I wasn't as high on them as I thought I was. So I really like this offseason. Bob Myers left. That was a big deal. Mike Dunleavy Jr.
Wow, you
took
hated
over.
Bob Myers, huh?
Yeah. Well, I mean, also, don't you just want Bob Myers like in charge of? I was thinking like who should actually be president, and I think I would just choose Bob Myers, just because whenever you hear him talk, he's like so measured and such a kind person and so thoughtful and really smart. Anyway, he left, and Mike Dunleavy took over. That at the time kind of felt like, oh boy, I think Bob's getting out because he knows like rough days are ahead.
It's over. Yeah.
To some extent, that proved to be the case. So Draymond Green also got a 4-year, $100 million contract. Got a trade kicker on that. Drafted Pods at 19. I think that's going to look a little better in the rear view. Sent cash to the Wizards for number 57. That turned into Trace Jackson Davis, who did he make an all rookie team or just mine? I forget, but he was playing real minutes. I don't know if you know this or if we talked about it, but Mike Dunleavy's brother is TJD's agent, and it seems very clear that he was steered to Golden State a little bit. But hey, you've got to play the game. Jordan Poole sent with a 27 second rounder and a 2030 first that has just hilarious top 20 protection and becomes to second if not conveyed. That brought back Chris Paul. I'm sure I recall thinking that made a lot of sense. Corey Joseph, Dario Saric on the minimum, Lester Quinones to a two-way. And he actually played, but he's not going to be back on the team this year. So, man, a lot happened. You were an A-. I was a B+. Shocking that you went higher than I did. Why were you so high? I wonder what...
I loved the CP3. Clearly, I knew Trace Jackson Davis was going to finish 11th in all rookie voting. So
okay,
he did not make an all rookie team. He was close.
Almost.
So I loved, but first of all, I was never high on Jordan Poole, and you knew that. So to get off of him while giving up basically a fake first, like if you don't want that pick to convey, it doesn't have to.
Right.
Like that's how I view it. I thought was a home run because even if CP3 didn't work out, and I think you can make like a different case of did he work out? Did he not? I don't know that he certainly didn't submarine their potential. I look at this offseason. Do you feel worse about anything they did?
No, I'm wondering why I was so low at the time. Like, why didn't I give this an A range grade? Maybe I was trying to avoid homerism.
We probably didn't think that like Pods or TJD were going to play actual roles at the time, especially
like
Pods,
how much would a number 57 pick have factored into any grade we would have given? Like, I guarantee you, I couldn't have picked Trace Jackson Davis out of a lineup a year ago. Like, I can't believe he was a factor at all. But yeah, the Pods one maybe because wasn't Jaquez one spot after, or was he one spot before? I can't remember. Either way, it was like, it could have been Jaquez.
Jaquez was drafted, so he was drafted after. Is that what you said?
No,
he was drafted a pick before. So
okay, all right. Yeah, I remember. Maybe I was disappointed, but like, well, if he wasn't on the board, he wasn't on the board. I don't know. Maybe I overrated the Bob Myers exit as much as anything. I'm just trying to just figure out how I wasn't.
I will say, I wonder if they could have played their hand more with Draymond Green, who claims that he took like this. He's what didn't he compare what he did to what Jalen Brunson did? And it's like, whoa, buddy, let's you need to have a market like to do that. And also, you didn't finish 5th in MVP voting the prior year and then agree to take a bunch of I found that.
No, this is, I mean, it's weird because like last year felt like a disappointment, I guess. You know, you don't make the playoffs. That's not great when you have Steph Curry still playing, like 90% of Steph Curry.
Can you ding them? But I will ask, because I think the reason to ding them, if you're going to ding them at all, would be why didn't they like be more aggressive in trying to acquire the guy?
Like, why didn't they pull off the Andrew Wiggins? Well, here's
like, why is Pod still on this team? Would be like, why isn't Siakam on this team instead of that would be, and I just don't think we continue to run into this issue with Golden State is we're telling them, no, you need to make the most of Steph Curry's prime. We just have no idea who will help you do that.
And then they say, how? And we say, don't know,
but you need to do it
now. Yeah. I guess I'm going to move up to an A-. I just don't see anything. Maybe the Green contract, just because he really, he missed a ton of the season because of suspension and he's aging and blah, blah, blah. But like when he's out there, he's still pretty close to the Draymond Green they need. So and getting off a Pool was huge. I mean, that even looks better because I don't know if you ever got on board with me, but I was like, Poole's going to average 28 a game and he's going to shoot 40%, but it's going to be fun.
You had us look up his scoring title odds.
Oh, yeah.
I
thought he was going to put in the biggest, like, it would be like Lou Williams ×2, just the biggest garbage bucket season ever. And he didn't do that. It was even worse than anyone could have imagined. So getting off that was huge.
In defense of Jordan Poole, who still does not play defense, he was a lot better towards the close of last year. Like they put the ball in his hands more with the second unit kind of. And so there's still hope. But if you're the Warriors, getting out of that deal was massive. I'm going to stick with an A-. I guess you could argue I was super high on the Saric signing, and that ended up not factoring in as much. I guess you could argue, well, why aren't you moving it up when TJD and Pods were clearly better than you expected? I just don't feel like CP3 was probably, I mean, he was about what I would have expected, but it didn't parlay the Warriors into being a good team. And also, I think I probably feel worse about the Draymond Green contract, not in a way of, oh, he can't be movable, he's not good, but like this dude is such a wild card. And it's like, even he hits threes last year. It's just like, could you give us like kind of a happy medium somewhere between maybe not trying to choke guys out and missing a whole bunch of time? And then can you like, maybe don't shoot like randomly 37% from three, but like, can you give us a few seasons of just 34% across the, but I just, given the direction of this team where it feels like even when they're trying to get guys like a Paul George or a Larry Markkinen, they're either not going to give up enough to get them or they don't have enough to get them. The Draymond Green contract, especially now that you've decided, oh, Clay is gone, it makes it feel a little bit more uneasier. And I mean, like, if you want me to bump them up to an A because Pods, I think, is really good. And I think I might be higher on, by the way, his ability to create than like every single Warriors fan. Not every single, but
like get his own shots, you mean?
Yeah. Like the step, like he's got the step back. Like they're done. Let's move on.
I just see a few too many no chance in hell like running hook shots out of him still. So that's gotta turn into something else. Maybe and
you said you're gonna bump them up to a
I'm gonna go A- just because Podziemski and it's, I guess, like you gotta credit him for Jackson Davis. Like 57th pick is starting for you at some point and like is looking like a rotation player. That's crazy.
I will say we've said that about so many Golden State rookies over
Eric
the Pascal
era. Remember the Eric Pascal era?
Remember the Jordan Bell was just, oh my God, I can't believe it's over. It's like, I need to see TJD do it again.
That's totally fair. But maybe the Podziemski exceeding expectations factor offsets that and still gets me to an A-.
Honestly, because nothing here, like if you look at these moves, they improve their long-term flexibility by getting rid of Jordan Poole, and everything else doesn't really impact their long-term except for Brandon Podziemski. And they knocked that pick out of the park for number 9. Who's the guy that was drafted after Pods that you would be like, oh, I mean, Cam Whitmore goes one after, but that's it.
Yeah. Nobody. And by the way, like, Cam Whitmore is really exciting as a scorer, but I don't think if you went league wide, it's like Cam Whitmore was not the deal breaker in a Lauri Markkinen trade. Like Pods was.
Honestly, they get an A. What did they do wrong? I'm looking at this right. I mean, it's the only thing would be, why didn't you get rid of Wiggins? And it's just, what opportunity was out there? And if you want to frame it as, well, knowing they didn't make the playoffs, would you rather have that first round pick or Jordan Poole? It's like, no. That's a fake first round. If I'm the Warriors, I view it as, I still have that first round pick.
Yeah. All right. Isn't it wild to up our offseason grades on a team that won fewer games than the year before and didn't make the playoffs, but it still feels right?
You would have to, what is maybe were we too high to begin with? And like, maybe because we can't walk it back, but
maybe that's what it is. Maybe, you know what, that's going forward. We're still moving up for them, but going forward, we need to reevaluate. Like, we can't just take what we thought last year and either move it up or down. We have to like first say, did the grade we gave them last year actually make sense in the first place before we start like.
I guess if maybe we overvalued the impact CP3 was going to have, but if we undervalue what Pods and TJD are going to do, it counters.
I'm not talking you out of the A. I'm going A-. We're both moving up. We need some teams to move to drop here.
It's coming. Here are the Clippers. Speaking of dropping teams.
Oh God.
They're my team. So they waived Eric Gordon to shave 9 figures off their tax bill. They re-signed Russell Westbrook to a 2-year deal using non-bird rights. He had a player option. They ended up trading him. They re-signed Mason Plumlee. They drafted Kobe Brown at number 30. They drafted Jordan Miller at number 48, signed him to a 2-way contract at the time. The note here is, I don't know how to we can't grade the James Harden trade because it happened during the season. So that's the note here.
Mhm.
That's the move we were waiting on. That's the reason why. Oh no, we gave them a grade. So I gave them a C. You gave them a C plus. I don't know if I guess the question about their offseason grade comes down because they didn't have the resources to just do a lot better than this. It's, oh, well, why didn't they use their taxpayer NLE? It's like, look who that turns into. It's Reggie Jackson, who you have to trade 3 first-round picks to get off. So do you feel better if you're the Clippers? Do you think that it made sense to, I mean, this is what's seeping into my logic. And this is why I think it needs to be a part of the logic. Paul George and Kawhi Leonard were extension eligible at the time. Listening back, Grant, we complimented the Clippers for not giving them extensions. It was, hey, prove it. But if you knew there was a chance that you were not going to pay Paul George because he wanted 4 years rather than 3, why did you ever make the James Harden trade?
Okay, I'm glad you got there because that's where I'm hung up. And now we're talking about this offseason, but like the idea that we're going to save money by not giving Paul George this 4th year, but then give $70 million guaranteed to James Harden is just like, I don't know. I know where I'm cutting costs and it's not starting with Paul George. But like, I don't know. Like, I think we were right to say you can't extend, and then they did extend Kawhi, but like, you can't do this. But Kawhi played 68 games last year. So, I mean, like holding off made sense. I think we were right to sort of praise them for that.
Can I provide some pushback there? Did it make sense? Because I think the thing that probably needs to factor into the grade is what concession did they avoid in the James Harden trade by waiting?
Oh, I see. So I don't know.
Wouldn't it have made more sense to, it ended up like working out and okay, they lose the first few games, then they look like a contender. But it's like you could have had a training camp with James. Like, my whole thing is, do you think Philly walked off their asking price enough by the Clippers waiting to have not made the move beforehand? The answer to me is no, because based off all the reporting, it doesn't seem like the Clippers avoided. They ended up having to take PJ Tucker back and had to send out Nick Batum. Those were 2 things we know that they didn't want to do. They got to keep Terrence Mann, I think is the big one where it's, okay, we got to keep Terrence Mann. And so maybe that's a case for this being a lateral, whatever. But like, they still continue for a lot of the time, like to like not, I don't want to say not value Terrence Mann, but he's not like, he was never like centrally utilized. I guess as the season goes on, sure. So I'm struggling with this. I don't know what to do with it.
Are you saying, or is your argument that they should have, if they were going to do the James Harden trade, that they should have done it in the offseason?
Yes. And then why are you bringing back Russell Westbrook is the other one. If
Isn't the better argument just don't do that? Like, are they better off if they just don't do that? That's like,
that can't factor into the grade because they didn't do that. But I'm not going to give them a positive grade for not doing it just to do it.
But you're also considering like, you're also grading them on something they didn't do, which is trade for James Harden before the season starts. I can see why this is so thorny. Here's where I land. Based on what they actually did, I have them at a C+. I don't feel like in hindsight, the moves they made warrant an above average grade. So I'm going to just go down to a C, which I feel like acknowledges their lack of flexibility and just better reflects, they didn't make any great moves. They didn't make any moves that killed them. And I don't know what to do with the James Harden thing. So I'm just moving down slightly to reflect. I don't see a reason to say this was an above average offseason.
I feel like I need to just go to a C- because I thought that like they traded for him November 1st. It wasn't like they waited until January. And so it's like, if you were just going to go turn around and do that, why not do it earlier so that you can get him to go through a training camp? I recognize that I can't move them down because we're getting into too many theoreticals there. Mm-hmm. And they didn't, by waiting, I will say, I don't think they missed out on other opportunities, but I think they obviously had enough intel that, well, that really should have factored into the way that you were viewing the Russell Westbrook stuff specifically. And I don't know, like, and if you were going to make the James Harden trade, which you were prepared to make, I do think you should have been more married I know we're getting into now this offseason, but you don't trade or get involved in the James Harden trade sweepstakes to be like, well, this will help offset it when we decide to not pay Paul George. Like you have to map out all these scenarios. And so I think they did a poor job of planning long-term here, or they didn't get enough out of their sort of long-term planning or whatever stance they drew during the offseason. So I'm going to bump them down to a C-, but I easily think if I was willing to just contradict myself even more than I do normally, that I could be talking like a D or an F. Probably.
Yeah. I guess like what really is sort of crystallizing as we're talking about this is they miscalculated in thinking that if we wait a little bit, we're going to be able to get James Harden for less because he's going to make it so impossible to exist in Philadelphia that eventually the Sixers will just have to take less. It doesn't really seem like that happened. Like it just, he cost what he cost. Philly got a decent, in Philly's eyes, got a great return for a guy that wasn't going to help him and didn't want to be there. But the Clippers didn't get a better deal necessarily by waiting. So to your point, just do it. But like it is a reasonable gambit to say like it's going to be so untenable in Philly if we wait into the season that we will be able to get him for less. They were just wrong about that.
I'll leave it at a C then, but because I think the only way that you could look at it positively from my end is if the difference was Philly wanted Terrence Mann until the season started, like insisted on Terrence Mann, and then you got to keep Terrence Mann, then you know what? That's technically a bonus. So I'll stick with a C because I do still think that's not a move you make without having this big picture logic in place. And if you already knew it was on shaky footing because you didn't extend Paul George. Mm-hmm. It's like that was already kind of unfolding, and yet you went and did this anyway. You know what I mean? So I'll leave it at a C. That's as high as I'm going. You can't talk me.
I wasn't trying to sway you one way or the other. I was just trying to make this make sense for me. All right, the Lakers are next. They're one of my teams. Signed Anthony Davis to a 3-year, $177 million extension. He's got a player option on the last year of that deal in 27-28. Gabe Vincent, 3 years, $33. Got Austin Reeves back, 4 years, $53.8 million, which there was talk of it being like 2x that or like some ridiculously higher number. Rui Hachimura back, 3 years, 51. D'Angelo Russell back, 2 years, 36. Essentially got a player option and like basically at the time seemed like he was re-signed to be traded because he waived his implied no trade clause. Taurean Prince, 1 year, $4.5 million. Jackson Hayes, 2 years minimum. Cam Reddish, 2 year minimum.
Both these players are back as of right now, so those player options are important.
Yeah, right. Jalen Hood-Schifino was the pick at 17. We just talked about Pods at 19 and Jaquez at 18, so that will be a factor.
Cam Whitmore at 20, right? Was he 20? Right? Yeah.
Wait, who? Oh yeah, Whitmore. Right. Yeah. Just throw a dart at the next 3 picks and it would have been better. I refuse to read the Mojave King Maxwell.
No, you're not. Again, you're not supposed to. You've been going way into more detail than I think.
Well, I just want to be thorough before because we gave this team a high grade, and I mean I don't know what to do with it, but
yeah. So listening back, I was wondering just what exactly we were smoking. A lot of it was
Reeves.
It was Reeves and a Gabe Vincent pipe.
Mm-hmm.
So they can't predict like Gabe Vincent not really playing. Like, that's not, so I don't view that as on them. And I still think that deal could end up being fine.
Yeah.
They missed on the draft pick. And then the fact that they kind of just like, didn't even like, I guess the minimum signings they're not even factor guys. And so like those, we were probably pretty like, oh, they took a gamble on Jackson Hayes. Okay. That's fine. I thought Taurean Prince was going to be good for them. I don't know if they used him properly. Lakers fans ended up hating him as well. Mm-hmm. He's like kind of 3-and-D, but goes through these stretches where he doesn't provide either.
Right.
And you would have to look back and say, well, what else were they supposed to do? And I think you could very easily say, well, they should have fucking drafted better.
Sure. That's that. And then it's a criticism. I don't know if it's a criticism, but it's an issue that persists, which is, couldn't you have taken a swing for a third star? You've got these two top end guys. Like, I don't know how much that factored in. I don't remember what I thought. For me, this has to be a worse grade because Reeves now feels like he's maybe properly valued at 4 years and 53. And I thought that was a heist at the time. And then the Hood-Schifino pick is a miss.
What did Austin Reeves do to you? I still think that deal is like in the green.
It's good, but it's not like, oh, he's making half of what I thought he should make. It's closer to proper value than the underpay I thought it was.
I do think also a miss because that was also part of our calculation is we just assumed that they were going to trade D, even if it wasn't for a third star. It's like, okay, You have this guy, you signed him so you could only trade him. And now so far they've passed on trading him twice, like 2 contract cycles, because it's, you kept him through that year and then he picks up his player option. And as of right, we're recording this, he's still on the roster. So I'm going to drop them down because the Rui Hachimura deal is fine. I didn't love it at the time. I still technically don't love it now, but I recognize he's a part of some of their best lineups. To me, the Vincent deal is fine. The Anthony Davis extension is good. The Reeves deal is still in the green. I'll go with a C-, but like they're very close to being in between the draft and the D'Lo misread. They're very close to being in the D territory.
So you're going from an A- to a C-. That's got to be our biggest drop so far.
It's probably like one of our biggest drops of all time, and it's fitting.
God.
It makes sense when you look at the Lakers front office when it comes to like normally they're pretty good at like finding players to develop on their own. But like the Jalen Hood-Schifino stuff was a mega miss.
That was a big miss. I mean, like the biggest business they did was getting. I mean, but then like how much credit do you give them for? Hey, Anthony Davis, do you want the most money we can possibly pay you? And he says yes. It's like, well,
I said it was fine. That's a C or a C+ move. Like it's not
right. Like should it even be a factor? Like just because like of course they offered it, of course he took it. Like next, there's not, I don't know.
No. What I will say is, and we did actually talk about this too, is the fact that he accepted it then, and so you got him for 3 rather than having to go out for 4 this summer, where it's then he's a year older, and we have to give him a player option when he's a year older than that. I actually think that ends up being better for the Lakers in terms of their flexibility.
I mean, I can't get all the way down to a below average just because I'm going to go down to just a flat C. Because there were some good moves, and then like the Hood-Schifino pick was really bad, and like nobody else that they really got on a minimum ended up it's a big drop, but it's still I'm not going to say it was like an overall below average performance.
I'm honestly in retrospect just can't believe how unbearably high.
I understand it though. I'm sure that because I really thought, wasn't it like, why don't the Spurs poison pill it? Like they got to go get Reeves and just maybe and the Lakers will have no choice but to match.
Honestly, if that's the argument of why are you giving them a below average rate, I still think I'm apparently way higher on that deal than you are. I guess if you're looking at this summer's market, but like he wasn't in this summer's market, he was in last summer's market.
Yeah.
So the Phoenix Suns, they're my team. They fired Monty Williams, brought in Frank Vogel. They traded CP3, Landry Shamet, 4 first-round swaps, and 4 second-round picks for Bradley Beal, Jordan Goodwin, and Isaiah Todd. They then traded. I'm not going through the Horcruxing of all the first round. They then Horcruxed all these different swaps on swaps, and you could swap the swaps for the swaps that have not been swapped yet. But future swaps compared to past swaps might have different value relative to the swaps in the quantum realm. So they did all of that. They signed. I was not my credit, but to be fair to you, I was sipping the Kool-Aid on their minimum deals more than you were. Eric Gordon, Josh Okogie, Keita Bates-Diop, Yuta Watanabe, Drew Eubanks, and Damian Lee all got 2-year minimum deals with player options on year 2. They signed Bol. They signed Chimezie Metu to 1-year minimums. They drafted Tamani Kamara at number 57, then signed him at the time because the timeline guys had told me to go look at him more. I was in love with him, but we graded their offseason, Grant, before they made the trade with Tamani Kamara and DeAndre Ayton. They sent out in that deal DeAndre Ayton and Tamani Kamara for Grayson Allen, Keon Johnson, Nasir Little, and Yusuf Nurkic. That is like, well, before we get into the grades, what would you rather have Ayton and Tamani Kamara, or just knowing how well Yusuf Nurkic played defensively last year, knowing how much the vibes were off with Ayton, it felt like, and then just what Grayson Allen did. Do you prefer, like, we didn't grade that deal, it was not part of our grade. So it's just what, like, in now that we're sort of a year removed from it, how do you puzzle that out?
I think I would rather have the Suns side of it, which means I'd rather have basically just Allen and Nurkic as opposed to Ayton and Kamara, just because Ayton's deal's bigger. It's hard for me to imagine that Ayton could have continued to like be on the Suns just based on years of, well, we're kind of sick of this guy type of stuff. But I really like Kamara. I think Allen has such a premium skill as a shooter, and Nurkic was just so much better than I thought, that I think I'd rather have those two guys as the headliners.
I think I'm with you, but for what this team actually needs, and I know they need Grayson Allen's 3-point volume, but that's also part of the problem for me, where it's like, well, you have Bradley Beal, Devin Booker, and Kevin Durant. You shouldn't. And that's what I'm struggling with this grade too, is in a vacuum, if you have a problem with the Bradley Beal trade, you actually have a problem with the Kevin Durant trade, because the assets that were available to the Suns, they were never going to get a better player in the vacuum than Bradley Beal. at the time. And we said it didn't matter that they didn't need a game manager. It turns out they might have. And then they signed 2 of them over this offseason.
They signed the 2 game managers.
They signed the game managers, not game managers, the game managers. So that doesn't pan out. I think Bradley Beal was fine for me. I just don't like, I'm not any higher or lower. I'm probably lower on his addition, but I do think he really tried to make an attempt to adapt. And if they string together even more performances where there's maybe not as choppy availability to start the season from him, but we were way too high on their minimums because that factored into my grade. So that has to come back. And we dismissed this idea that, I don't think getting rid of Campaign is still not something I view as sort of unforgivable, but at the same time, it's, they punted on having a floor general. And it turns out they actually needed one. However, if we're saying that they got the better end of the trade, like that trade with Portland and Milwaukee, I don't know where we gave them A's.
Right.
I don't think they can get an A now based off how last season unfolded.
I feel like I need to really recalibrate here because in my heart of hearts, I hate the Bradley Beal deal. I hate how much it cost to get him. I still think he's a duplicative player. I hate the current position they're in, which this past offseason went a long way toward, confining them to. They have since fired Frank Vogel and hired someone else to coach the team.
Right.
And the trade, I did say I prefer the Suns side of it, but it's close. It's an argument for sure. Just because Kamara is that guy should be your 5th closer or whatever with this version of the Suns. The minimums. This is a lesson I think I'm going to take is I am going to stop overvaluing oh my God, they got a $7 million player for 2. That stuff just doesn't matter that much. I was wrong in thinking they deserve such a high grade for getting Gordon, Okogie, KBD, all these guys for nothing because they just didn't end up mattering that much. Maybe Gordon a little bit. So I'm going to go, I had a flat A. I'm shocked to see I was higher than you.
I was shocked to see that too.
Because I don't know. You must have swayed me on the Beal thing because it is a good argument that you're already kind of pot committed. You got Kevin Durant. You've given up all this stuff. Why not more?
Well, I think
I'm going to go down to. I'm going to go down to a C. Have I given a D yet? I'm going down to a D+ because I think last offseason went a long way toward putting the Suns in a position that, in fact, no team wants to be in, contrary to what Matt Ishbia says. So, I'm going way down to a D+.
I'm going to drop them down to a D. Just the difference in the Frank Vogel stuff was a misread. And the other thing too is you can still argue that the Bradley Beal trade is not the one that put the Suns in this shortened window, but to now just lose control over all of your first round picks until technically 2031, they could, and they'll probably still move that one. It was you're looking at this team and you could also argue, had they kept CP3 or done something would this team have been better last year with CP3 instead of Bradley Beal?
Or just somebody else that they could have traded CP3 and some of those swaps or whatever for.
Zach LaVine? Opportunity Zach LaVine over Bradley Beal? He ended up getting injured. So the thing was Bradley Beal had the no trade clause, which is why he was available to them. But now you saddled yourself with that same no trade clause.
Yeah. I think that just the last thing I'll say is if you view the Suns as being in jail basically and having no outs, this past offseason went a long way toward putting them there. Man, what a drop for both of those.
So you went to a D+, you said, right? I don't know why I'm marking this. We need to we're gonna regrade the regrades in a couple of years.
Ooh.
Your favorite to this is everyone in the comment section alert. It's Grant talking about the Kings mine. No, the Kings are yours. Okay, that's how we set it up.
They sure are. Harrison Barnes came back on a 3-year, $54 million deal. Sasha Vezenkov, 3 years, $20 million. Had a team option on that. Trey Lyles back 2 years, 16. The draft stuff seems mostly inconsequential here, unless you want to vamp on it. Gave up number 24 and Richaun Holmes to Dallas for cash. Traded the Mavs 28 and a 2030 for Chris Duarte. Oh boy,
that was a bad deal on this one.
Wow. Okay, the big one here: renegotiated and extended Domantas Sabonis, 4 years, $186 million. Goes through his age 32 season, no options. So basically becomes a 5-year, $214.8 million contract. Alex Lenback, Keon Ellis on a two-way. There's some positivity.
Yeah, that's a hashtag home run. We were
D
not
plus.
surprised. We both gave D. I thought you gave an F for some reason.
No.
So the stuff to relitigate is the Barnes deal. I ended up being too high on, but you ended up being able to use him to get DeMar DeRozan.
Yeah.
And it's not like you had to give up a ton of compensate. Like, yeah, okay, the 2031 swap, but even if it was a different salary filler than Barnes. But here's my thing is we gave D pluses, and I think by and large, with the exception of Keon Ellis and Trey Lyles was fine. Like most of this stuff played out worse.
Yep.
And I think the Keon Ellis, that's a positive for sure. The Domantas Sabonis renegotiating extension, I still didn't understand the reason to do it. And I don't now. And the only argument you could make, which is not necessarily one of the favors, well, okay, it means that he's under contract for 4 more years as of right now, rather than 5. And maybe you don't want to pay him that far out. You didn't save a ton of money per year. His salary, because of how he signs his extension, it's like 28% of the cap versus it would have been 30. So like, you don't get to sell me on that. Well, hey, they saved 2% of the salary cap. So I still would not have done it. I would have forced him to go in the market. And if they had to max him because there was another offer out there, then so be it. I get they were worried about losing him. So I said, I understood the logic. I just didn't agree with it.
Yeah.
I'm still there now. I think he's a hell of a player. But if you could have had cap space and you could have just done some move. And even if you thought nothing else was available to them, I am patently against putting yourself in a position to where you gave up a first round pick to facilitate the flexibility that turned out to be, I'm not saying just Sabonis, but this offseason. So, and I know it turned into Omax, who didn't do anything in Dallas. Like, I totally get it, but I don't view this. I probably view it the same because of Keon Ellis and what you were able to do with Harrison Barnes, who I also just think became an unfair scapegoat in Sacramento. And it's just like what they were asking him to do defensively is like Harrison Barnes shouldn't be doing those things defensively in the year 2024. So, and just like the Chris Duarte trade was a fucking miss. Like you give up those 2 Dallas seconds for, and again, he was part of the DeMar DeRozan sign and trade too.
I think Vezenkov was a miss. It's a minor miss, but it's still a miss. Like not on the team anymore.
They were lucky they didn't have to like go through the drop. I guess they were going through there. He ended up requesting a trade. That's a miss. Yeah, you could have used that money. Try to use that money on someone else. So it just the Ellis move is, that guy's going to really matter for this team this season. And we're talking about last year, and he did matter last season. Just could guard, energetic, like they just provides things that they don't get from other players at the position, especially now Davion Mitchell's gone. But the Sabonis thing, it's the same argument I made 15 times. It's just like, maybe I'm wrong about the type of team the Kings want to be, but I assumed that last year there was let's step forward. Let's level up. Let's be a better team than we've been. And Sabonis is just not the player that can help them do that. It just because of all of his limitations defensively as a spacer, all that stuff, said it a million times. So to just basically cement him as a cornerstone piece, I thought just put a top on how good you can be. And guess what? They were pretty much the same last year as they were the year before. And I don't see a reason to believe that they're going to take that step forward next year. That's not all on Sabonis. A lot of it is on the misses we just talked about. But I do think it feels weirdly unambitious, or detrimentally unambitious to say, we're going to make this guy a $250 million player. It's going to foreclose on all this other opportunity potentially to get different types of guys around Fox, around Monk, around DeRozan now. So D plus is a really bad grade. So I'm just going to stay at a D plus because this kind of went how I thought it would go a year ago. I'm probably higher on you about them taking a step forward next season because I think the DeMar DeRozan fit is more of a feature for what they needed than a potential bug, as a lot of people view it. But I'm sticking with the D plus too. I mean, the key, it's basically Keon Ellis saving them. Right.
It doesn't outweigh all the other stuff. It's nice, but it's just a little tiny, it's a grain of sand on the scale and you got like a metric ton of shit on the other side. It doesn't really help. Yeah, and again, maybe I would have felt differently. It's just, the only reason to even like the Sabonis renegotiate and extend, as I mentioned, is that it shaves 1 fewer year for the commitment off, and it's if you really want what you're saying. The reason it's good is because you don't have to have him for as long. That's crazy. That's my point, though. Is if you're otherwise, you could just say, well, they weren't going to be able to use that space on someone else. Then I get it, but
I also disagree. Like there's just other players in the, like you didn't have to go after Vazenkov, which he was the room exception for them. Right. So it's just like, you could have used that to funnel it elsewhere. And I'm against, like, frame it this way. I think we're attaching it too much to the Sabonis stuff. Is if you had to trade a first round pick that could maybe have been objectively used to acquire a player rather than flexibility, your offseason needs to be better than this. And it also prevented you from then going out on the trade market and doing something mid-season. And that's also, like, you could ding the Kings. You called it detrimentally unambitious. I think the kindest way to put it would be weirdly unambitious, because they didn't even make a move in the middle of the season where it's like, why weren't you the Royce O'Neal team for what he cost? And so now they were aggressive with DeMar DeRozan. So this offseason will be fascinating. But in retrospect, like we thought they had a pretty bad offseason, and it turns out that we were right.
Yeah, we nailed it.
On to the Dallas Mavericks. They did a whole bunch. Re-signed Kyrie Irving for 3 years, $120 million, the player option on that final year when he'll be entering his age 33 season. Traded the pick that became Cason Wallace along with Davis Bertans to OKC for Derek Lively. It created also a $17 million traded player exception. So they got Lively and a massive trade exception that they helped use to take on Rashawn Holmes and get number 24, Olivier Maxence Prosper. They re-signed Dwight Powell to a 3-year, $12 million deal with a player option for some reason. They traded Reggie Bullock in the 2030 first round swap to San Antonio, and a 2025 conditional second and a 2030 second rounder to Boston for Grant Williams, who signed a 4-year, $53.3 million deal with no options. They signed Seth Curry 2 years, $8 million. The final year is non-guaranteed. Signed Dante Exum 2 years, $6.2 million. Second year was non-guaranteed. He's still on the team. And they signed Derrick Jones Jr., who ended up turning out pretty well for them. I was actually shocked that we were as high as we were on this season in real time. Off-season real time, but they get an A. I don't think the Grant Williams business for me in retrospect is like, oh, okay, that went super poorly. But if you even framed it as, well, we had to give up this first round swap plus the first round pick to get PJ Washington, like you were making that trade.
Yes.
I might stick with an A- because I just don't understand why Dwight Powell has a player option, but they hit on Derrick Jones Jr., they hit on Dante Exum. They somehow, they got the best player in the OKC deal while getting rid of the worst player in the OKC. It's just.
So for me, I was also surprised because maybe by this point, because I catastrophized about the Kyrie Irving trade just because, oh my God, if he's the same guy, then they're going to lose Luka because he's going to hate this and ask out when the Mavs aren't good and Kyrie's not on the, not around. So I had a B+, and it's just an A for me. Yeah, they drafted. I mean, they drafted well, or I guess traded for the draft pick really well, because this is interesting. Sort of juxtaposition between there's an argument either way from OKC's perspective whether they came out ahead. For Dallas, it's oh no, Lively was the guy they needed. He's a cornerstone now. This was a great trade. So drafted well. Irving, I think, is that's a great value for a player that has a ceiling as high as he does. 3 years, 120. Every trade, even the worst trade they made, or the worst move they made, was Grant Williams, but that turns into PJ Washington. Finding Dante Exum, come on. And Derrick Jones Jr. was one of the best signings of the off. Do I have any A+? They made the finals. I'm going to give them an A+. I don't care about the Dwight Powell thing because he's just going to be Udonis Haslem for them.
How do you square away just the fact that it took what happened at the deadline for them to become that team, though? Well, Grant Williams is a part of it by not being a part of it. It's like warping my brain with the way to view that.
I guess it's a question of do you credit them? If it's just about the offseason, then the Grant Williams acquisition is probably not something that makes them A+ worthy. Good point.
Well, Good point. Because it'd be different if he was still on the team.
Well, but this is just the offseason. I guess the argument would be Grant Williams still was valuable enough at the number they signed him to get you PJ Washington, essentially. Maybe, and that's a fair argument. It's just, it's divorced enough from the offseason itself that you're kind of making me.
Yeah, I don't know if I go to just an A+ because of how he panned out, because that's a perfect offseason. It's sort of, if you're factoring in the PJ Washington deal, I just don't know that we can. We harped on that while we were talking about it. We were worried about that swap that they gave up. It's is Luka still going to be there? That whole thing. And so you feel better about the swap in general, but Grant Williams still didn't I'm sorry. It wasn't Derrick Jones Jr. who was billed as the guy who was going to be the wing. It was Grant Williams was going to change their defensive culture. He ends up.
It was Derek Jones Jr. in the end, and they still, you know what? There's enough. I'm sticking with an A+. There's enough home runs here, draft wise, signing wise, extension wise, or contract. I just think.
I think that's smart of you because Mavericks fans were really mad at you in the comments the other day because you talked about Luka being out of shape, and I took it because I know how you meant it as him coming into camp in shape, which he did last year, but has been a problem in the past. But as people who've defended Zion Williamson and Nikola Jokic, like we understand that Luka is not a couch potato. He has good stamina. It's just sometimes he chooses not to use it because he's arguing with the refs. And he teased us this year by not arguing with the refs for a good portion of the time and then getting right back to it.
I appreciate you taking up for me. I still think Luka Doncic needs to be in better shape. You're not gonna
not said that, so we don't have to deal with the notes in the comment section.
Just send them my way, and I'll happily ignore it all. Like, come on, like what? Isn't that doesn't feel like a crazy take that the guy?
Yeah, it does.
In better shape.
That feels like a crazy take. Where is it that Luka's stamina has hurt the Mavericks? I'm genuinely asking.
I think. Well, one, they play at such a slow pace because he likes to play that way.
They played faster this year, but go on.
They did. You can't look at, okay, how about this? I'll admit this is a lazy argument, which is apropos because we're talking about someone I don't think is in the best shape he could be in. You can't look at Luka Doncic and say that guy's in the best shape he could possibly be in.
Could you say that about Nikola Jokic though? Because I don't see you lampooning Nikola Jokic in the same way.
I guess, well, would you also say though that Jokic has clearly gotten in much better shape than he was in several years ago? Like,
yeah, but I would argue that I feel like Luka has too, just in the level. I think you could criticize him for his effort level on defense. Does that have to do with his stamina? But his effort level on defense a lot of the time this year was probably higher than we're used to seeing.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe it's just because he's so unlimited and so great at everything that I want to see like what that looks like in a maximized like physical shape package.
Okay, we watched LeBron for 20 something years. Like, doesn't that?
Yes, show me that. That's what I'd like to see.
Houston Rockets. Let's move on. We've already lost, but we've probably been downvoted by a bunch of Mavs fans by now.
That's all right.
The Rockets are you, right?
Yeah. Yes. Okay. So replaced head coach Steven Silas with Ime Udoka, Amen Thompson at number 5, Cam Whitmore at 25. Jesus.
That's number 20. I don't know why.
20. Okay. Yeah.
I apologize.
Traded Brooklyn's own 2028 second to the Nets for Patty Mills and Milwaukee's 2020 second. Fred VanVleet, 3 years, 128.5 team option on the last year of that. Got Jeff Green, which we mentioned in the Nuggets section, 2 years, $16 million non-guarantee on the second. Another non-guarantee, several non-guaranteed years for Jock Landale, 4 for 32. They
got Dylan Brooks for 4 years and $86 million. It could go up to $90 million. I think that's
good call. That's not on here. And then there's like Dylan Brooks is the headliner of this complicated trade, 4 for 86.
5-team trade, by the way. That was.
Well, so that got somebody, the Warriors and somebody else beat that this year as a 6-teamer, right?
I think it was a 6-teamer. Yeah. When are we going to get the first 7-team trade? I better not have to grade that one. I tell you that much.
Oof, that's a lot of slides. Okay, so you had a B+ here. I had an A-.
It's an A. I mean, honestly, it's an A+. This is the A+ team. Where was the move that didn't work? Because you still have those non-guaranteed deals to use if you want to make a trade. You like Fred. I think people harped too much on Fred VanVleet is really what it came down to for me because like it's a 2-year max. Right. Like you had all this money to spend, and he is the perfect guy when it comes to not infringing upon the development of players who are more important in the long term. And guess what happened? He did not infringe upon the development of Cam Whitmore, Amen Thompson. He wasn't the reason Jalen Green sucked it up until February or March. Alperen Sengun, and him and Alperen Sengun's partnership really worked out. So this is the A+. Like this was a fantastic.
Yeah.
I mean, and even right down, Ime Udoka came in, and I know they have talent, but if I would have told you Jay Sean Tate would play X amount of minutes, Tari Eason would miss most of the season, and this is going to be the 5th or 7th best defense in the league. You don't look at the personnel and say that. Like, look at the strides Jabari Smith Jr. made last year. This is the A+. I guess you could say, but like, what did they do that would be viewed as negative last summer?
No, I'm coming with you.
Well, this did not include the Kevin Porter situation, domestic violence allegations,
and the road not taken. This Brooke Lopez could have been on this team, and Brooke Lopez decided not to be, and that changes their offseason. So like I don't know. Probably.
By the way, we did ding them for that by just clearly
Okay.
misreading the Brook Lopez situation and being used
Yeah.
as a stalking horse. But how did it end up hurting them?
It didn't. It turned out great. But I guess the argument would be like, had they gotten what they wanted, they would have had Brook Lopez, and it's not somebody else. But who knows? Maybe that would have worked out.
And Alperen Şengün would not be who Alperen Şengün is right now.
That's the argument. That's right. It's still an A+. Like they just, I don't know. The Fred VanVleet thing, I get it if it's a little sticker shocky, but spoiler, next
He's
week, I think,
contract now because he has the team option on year
3.
Like what?
Next week, I got something coming out where he will factor, I don't want to totally spoil it, but very, very heavily in the most underrated players of the last 5 years. Like that guy,
going to be players who bet on themselves.
That guy is
him, Jonte Porter. Who else would fall into that category?
Yeah, that's easy. A+, just dominant. They added 19 wins to their total. Like
and just the fact that we're looking. And by the way, it's too current, but just like you could view it this way: one of the 5-7 best defenses in the league just added Reed fucking Shepherd. Like what is like?
We're gonna have to be real careful about getting crazy on how good we think the Rockets are gonna be.
The Grizzlies, who will be good, but we did not look upon their offseason very favorably. We didn't kill it though when I listened back, but they traded Tyus Jones, number 25, Marcus Sasser, and Golden State's 2021 round pick. That was the Bub Carrington pick, I believe, right? For Marcus.
Sounds right.
Yeah, because that was traded to Portland, which then became which was traded to Washington, became Bub Carrington. Yeah. So they traded that for Marcus Smart. Signed Desmond Bane to a 5-year, $197.2 million extension, $8.7 million in unlikely incentives. There's no options on that. They had the 5-team. They were part of the 5-team trade with Dylan Brooks. They basically didn't get anything out of that. They signed and traded Dylan Brooks, and they were able to get Josh Christopher, who they waived, and they created a TPE. They signed Derrick Rose to a 2-year, fully guaranteed veterans minimum deal. They traded 2028 and 2029 second-round picks to Phoenix for the least favorable 24 first-round swap and least favorable 2030 first-round swap. And the thing that was not graded as part of it was they drafted Gigi Jackson at number 45, but he was unsigned at the time we did the grades. He then was signed, and the rest was history for him. I still think you can be optimistic about I gave them, I believe I was lower than you on their offseason. I gave them a C-. You gave them a C+.
Yep.
I believe that you could feel good about their future and still question a lot of the process here. But I do believe that I don't know what to do about their grade because Marcus Smart was not good and he was injured. So does that bring their grade down? But then it's clearly Desmond Bane takes another leap forward. So we already considered him a no-brainer at this number. He's even more of a no-brainer now. But Gigi Jackson, would he turn into, is he just the solution as the combo 3-4 that they need? I don't know what to do with their grade. Are you going up or down?
It's just so hard to judge it because it was a lost season, and you might feel differently about Marcus Smart or several other guys if, a million different players had been on the floor. I kind of think I'm with you on just the process of it feels, and just generally the Grizzlies transactional process over the last several years, it just feels like they've left so much money on the table. I don't know how fair that is. I'm going to just drop it to a C.
It's a C. And I think the best way to frame it, and I'm sorry to interject, is they gave up too much for Marcus Smart, but you hit on Gigi Jackson. And I would say Desmond Bane's deal to me looks like an above average deal from a team perspective.
And it might look a little better today than it did at the time, just because the cap's gone crazy and it's not a percentage max, right? It's just a flat number because this is a sub max. I think, I forget all this if I'm wrong, but it's going to look better as the years go on, I think. And even though he was among the guys that, missed a bunch of time, I didn't see anything last year that suggested that was, it's a risky deal. He's not going to make good on that. I don't think that happened at all.
He leveled up once again as a shot creator and playmaker. So I think I'm sticking with a C though, because their process continues to be questionable when you look at what they had to give up to get off of Zaire Williams so that they could stay far enough beneath the tax to go re-sign Luke Kennard, whose team option they declined so they could save $3 million off his money.
Yeah.
It's a C for me. I think you could probably make a case for a C+, but you can't tell me as of right now, because we can't grade this on imagine if the Marcus Smart trade is better than we expect. It's we just saw it in action. You could say this is why we play the games. He didn't play enough of the games. He was sloppy on the offensive end, which might have to do with John Morant's absence. That's still the whole reason to have Marcus Smart, though, is to help you navigate the John Morant absences.
Yeah, remember it was like he needs to replace Dylan Brooks and John Morant for like a third.
And the Dylan Brooks stuff is still just okay. I'm fine with them of letting him walk. He really reined in his shots. That was the other. That's why Houston gets an A plus. Is Dylan Brooks reins in his shot selection.
Right, they got him under control to the extent that's possible.
Like, the whole like ethering him on the way out and just deciding that hey, this person who's super important to our defense, we're just not going to get any real value for. Like that's bizarre.
Yeah. New Orleans, this will be a quick one, not a whole lot of action. Jordan Hawkins at number 14. I love Jordan Hawkins. Signed Herb Jones for 4 years, $53.8 million, no options. That ends at his age 28 season. That's I'm already seeing the grade go up, even though I don't know what we gave them initially. Waived and re-signed EJ Liddell, 2 years, $6.2 million, first 2 seasons of which are 2. I'm not sure what the
he's not even on the team anymore.
Okay, gone. Signed Cody Zeller. That's it. That's what we got. Why don't we have grades for the Pelicans? Did we not grade them? Had they not done anything last year?
Were we just because there was no why is the Herb? Did I not have the Herb Jones deal on here? No, I didn't. But you remember that, by the way, that people were freaking out over the Herb Jones deal.
One of the best deals in the league.
Yeah, it's one of the best deals in the league. What did we go TBD because we thought that they were going to make some type of a move?
I don't know. Maybe all I know is that this just feels like if all I'm seeing is Jordan Hawkins at 14 and Herb Jones for 4 years, 53. Why is this not an A? You have to go down the road of like, well, they could have done X, Y, and Z, and they didn't. It's just got to be an opportunity.
I think if you were prepared to let Jonas Valanciunas walk, which they apparently were, is you should have made more of an effort to move him last offseason to tweak the center position. But they were also kind of still in team continuity mode.
And if you foresaw any chance of the Brandon Ingram situation getting to where it is, like in other situations, we're always saying you can't let the guy get to the last year of his deal. We did it to Toronto with Anunoby and Siakam. You gotta do something if you don't want to extend him and you think you might get to next year.
That's more of a like this offseason grade though, because with Jonas Valanciunas, it was you clearly needed like some diversity at the center position, like a functional diversification at the center position, and you like kind of punted on it, I guess, in just service of, well, let's see if this team remains healthy. So I'm still going to give them an A because that Herb Jones, I'm sure we gave grades. I'm listening back and I think we might've given them an A in the moment, by the way.
The Jones deal by itself is an A. And again, I think Hawkins is like the kind of shooter you can build a whole scheme around.
It's probably mostly unfair to do the whole grading them against what they didn't do, like at least starkly, because to me, it's like, if you want to nudge it down a bit because it's Jonas Valanciunas, like, why didn't you explore that? Like, or don't even view it through the lens of Jonas Valanciunas. Why weren't you more aggressively trying to shake up the center position last offseason? I actually think that's fine to demerit them for, but I think Jordan Hawkins was fine value at number 14. And then when you end up with Herb Jones on like, making less than 10% of the salary cap, like, come on.
Ridiculous.
Final team, also an easy team, even though they're a mess of transactions here. The Spurs drafted Victor Wembanyama at number 1. That's an A+, and let's move on. We done? So here's the thing, and I'd like us to keep this in mind when we do our preamble for the grades this year, is that you and I have dismissed, and maybe I've been driving that bus of just like, when we talked about this, it was, well, there was no choice to make there. Like, we can't grade the Spurs in favor of that, but there's also a risk in the road, like not taking the road less traveled. So yeah, do they deserve as much credit as like for taking Wemby as, let's say, the Hornets do for Brandon Miller? No, because there was an actual decision to be made there, but you still have to make the decision. And so that's an A+ move. And that's something that I shouldn't have put you into that bucket. I need to do a better job of just, we didn't factor him enough into their grade, which ended up, by the way, from both of us, I gave him an A, you gave him a B+, but like, I think in the moment it could have been, yeah, okay, don't grade them higher, but it's not like we didn't give them any credit for drafting Wemby, is basically.
Yeah. To be honest, I'm still not sure what to do with that, because like, I feel like if we listen back to just this episode, in some cases, we just gave a high grade in situation. Now, this is the ultimate. There was no decision to make here. Like, all 30 teams make the same decision. There's probably some instances where we've praised teams for kind of doing similar stuff where it's like, well, I mean, of course you did this. Everybody would have done this in your position. I don't know how to, because it just should be as simple as they got Victor Wembanyama, therefore their off season was an A+. Like, you got this guy.
Yeah.
But I guess my B+ was very much hung up on like, you could have, like, there's no one that would have been in charge of the Spurs pick someone off the street. They would have just picked Wembanyama. So it's like, I don't know what to do with that.
I think and maybe you're onto something in the sense of the way we approached it after the draft is right because we haven't watched him play, but the way we're approaching it now in the regrade because we've seen Victor Wembanyama, okay, anyone would have made that decision, but like, what are you going to not give them credit for drafting probably one of the best players of all time?
Yeah, no, I know I'm not sure what to do. Like, well, maybe.
Well,
So the thing we didn't mention is the Devin Vassell deal was not part of
I
our
was going to go through what would you give? Let's remove Victor Wembanyama from the equation. But so some of the deals that stand out to me, again, transaction sheets on YouTube. They traded number 33, which became Leonard Miller to Minnesota for Utah's 26 second and Minnesota's 28 second. They signed Julian Champagnie to 4 years, $12 million with only the first year was guaranteed. That was a really good deal. They turned the Lakers 26 second into Jetty Osman and the Cavs' 2030 second. That's a nice little piece of business right there. They traded a 2024 second, a more favorable one from Chicago and New Orleans, a Toronto 2025 second, and Miami's 2028 second for Reggie Bullock and that 2030 first round swap with the Mavs. Signed Trey Jones for 2 years, $19 million. His salary actually declines in the second year, which is this coming season. Traded a fake first rounder to the Suns for campaign and a second and cash. They signed Mamu Skelly. That was the number 54 pick in 2021. And then the Devin Vassell extension, which I would say looks just as good or better. 5 years, $135 million with the language, unlikely incentives that could bring it up to 146. I think independent of Wembanyama, they still have a case for an A offseason when you just look at the work they did on the margins. And the only argument against it for me would be, well, they should have like made more use of like all this flexibility and gone after a win now player, which they just weren't good enough to do.
Which they did this summer anyway. You get Harrison Barnes and Chris Paul.
But that's not like ultra aggressive, right?
No. Right. I'll just go A-. And I think honestly, like, I just don't know what to do with the Wemby thing. I'm almost giving them an A- on everything that excluding Wemby, just because I don't know how to weigh that draft pick.
What did they do? What
nothing
did pan out here? Are you like,
No, nothing really. Like, I don't know. It could be an A, I guess. I guess maybe the Vassell deal had Vassell had like a phenomenal year. It's like, oh my God, this is clearly the number 2 to Wemby for the next decade. Okay. Maybe that's an A. I don't know. If you split hairs between A and A-. The Wemby thing is still just feels like, how do you credit a team for doing the most obvious thing of the entire offseason? You know,
that's our homework is we need to come back when we're ready for actual grades of the 24 offseason. We need to come back with a system of how to view those.
Right.
Like, we understand that
if there were no other options.
Yeah. So I think this was fun. I enjoyed it.
I look, we're now officially accountable on the record. So congratulations to us. We did.
Whether you still agree with us or not is irrelevant. We are we are on the record.
Never speak of the 23 offseason again. That's the other thing about this. This is the last time we'll talk about it. We've decided that.
Would you like to take us out of here, kind sir?
Sure. Thanks everybody for listening, for watching. I hope you enjoyed Dan's painstakingly crafted graphics, YouTube viewers, because I was impressed by them, and I hope that you were too. As a reminder, please, if you have not already, rate, review, subscribe, give us a thumbs up, comment on YouTube, engage in the conversation there, join our Discord, check out our merch. What else? What else do I usually like to say? I think that's probably it. Help us grow the podcast. Tell your friends, tell your enemies, do all the normal stuff we always ask of you. We appreciate all of your input. Everybody who's listened and watched. Shouts, Frank Ntilikina. Apologies, Jarrett Allen.